Welcome back. You're watching the Urban Debates. I'm Faye. The Enforcement Directorate has registered a case of money laundering against the management of the ex-management of IL&FS. It has been conducting raids at the homes and offices of the ex-management. According to agency reports, this case was registered based on the EOW of Delhi police that have alleged that there has been forgery and cheating on the part of the management of this company since 2010 for the last 8 years. The management has been accused of misreporting income, conducting dubious transactions, and increasing their own wealth at the cost of their investors and employees. Now, this is important because IL&FS could just be the biggest financial problem in our country unfolding before our eyes. The company borrowed 91,000 crore rupees from banks and mutual funds and investors, some of which has also come from the Employee Provident Fund. It's not in a position to pay that money back. This was discovered in June last year after it defaulted on one loan, and post that, things have gone south. Banks alone might have to write off about 30,000 crore rupees in this financial year alone. 63,000 crore rupees of loans are in the red category, which means that the chances of them being paid back are slim. The questions that have to be asked now are these. If there was forgery and cheating that had been taking place for over 8 years, why is it the biggest shareholders of the company, LIC and SBI, who have members on the board, did not notice? How is it that the banking regulator, the RBI, or the capital markets regulator, the SEBI, I beg your pardon, who are supposed to be keeping an eye on these companies, missed this altogether? And how is it that the top auditors who have been looking at this company missed the financial irregularities? Also, rating agencies that have given it a AAA rating for several years together did not in any way indicate that there is a problem with this company. The reason why we have to talk about it today is because in some way or the other, as a country, we will have to account for the 91,000 crore rupees if it cannot be paid back. Half of it or some of it may be recovered by liquidating the assets of the company. But is our financial system right now so opaque and so weak that one company could actually question all of it? The reason why we're going to bring this up is because we're going to try and understand if there are bits and pieces of our financial markets that perhaps need reworking. And if really the system is designed to help the rich and the powerful. Joining me on the show today, Bhaskar Ghosh for the BJP. We also have J.N. Gupta, Managing Director of the Stakeholders Empowerment Services, former Executive Director at SEBI, the markets regulator. C.M. Vasudev is the former Finance Secretary. Saugata Ghosh is the Associate Editor of the Economic Times. And Sanjay Hegde, Senior Advocate with the Supreme Court. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us on the show. I do want to start with Mr. C.M. Vasudev. Mr. Vasudev, thank you for joining us and good evening. My question to you is this. How worrying is the IL&FS problem right now? And the 91,000 crore rupees that it might not be able to pay back, does it indicate that our regulators perhaps either don't have the full power or are not able to do their jobs?
You know, there are two or three things I want to mention.
Yes.
One, of course, there is no question that there has been a lot of misgovernance in IL&FS and in banking parlance term, what is called asset liability mismatch that has happened. They have borrowed money from banks which have shorter tenure, and they have invested in projects which will start yielding return after much longer tenures. So there is what is called an asset liability match which has created this problem for them. I don't think anybody has tried to figure out or find out that this 91,000 crore exposure that they have to banks and NBFCs and other institutions, how much of the 91,000 crores is backed by assets that have been created with that? It's a different matter that those assets have not started yielding any return as yet because they are long gestation, whether they are roads or other infrastructure projects, which take 6, 7, 8 years for the returns to start flowing in, whereas the bank's money that they have borrowed may be of a 3, 4, 5 year tenure. So that type of a mismatch is there. Unless somebody was to try to find out what is the value of the underlying assets which have been created by IL&FS, it is very difficult to say or to come to any conclusion that there has been any diversion of money or any leakage of money. I think we somehow tend to go overboard when there are defaults in banks, as if everybody is a willful defaulter, everybody is a cheat who is not able to pay money. There are commercial reasons, sometimes there are misgovernance issues, as in this case. But to classify, I wouldn't at this stage say that IL&FS is a willful defaulter. It is a defaulter, certainly yes, but it is a defaulter because of poor commercial decisions. It has stretched its whole system so much, created 250 companies, but it was a pioneer in many ways by setting up toll roads and all that. So, but those investments have not started yielding results. So I would say that these are bad commercial decisions, bad governance of the company which has brought it to this pass. But the underlying assets, I'm sure, are worth 90,000 crores, if not closer to that.
So, Govt, do you agree that there will be underlying assets? Because the last report says banks would have to write off about 30,000 crore rupees, that 63,000 crore rupees is in red, and the underlying assets would actually amount to maybe another 30,000 crore rupees or something to that amount.
One really doesn't know.
Yes.
One really doesn't know. As far as IL&FS is concerned, what brought them down was misgovernance, mindless expansion, and certain ethical issues like directors taking fancy salaries, buying the best cars, even when cash was drying out in the company. So these things, and when the bubble burst, all these things came to the fore.
But tell me something, the EOW has actually said in Delhi that there has been forgery and corruption and cheating taking place in this company between 2010 and 2018. That's not an ethical issue. Forgery and cheating and forging your numbers is actually a crime.
Right, but we have the press release. There is another FIR which has been filed, the EOW FIR.
Yes.
If you restrict to that, then we don't know whether it's the allegation by an aggrieved investor who was led up the garden path and found himself holding a lemon, or really there was a money laundering, in the sense there was an entry transaction where IL&FS gave bogus orders and got back cash.
So explain to me this. We do know that there are mutual funds who have money in this, which is actually money of ordinary citizens that are watching at home. The Public Provident or the Employee Provident Fund, which is salaried employees Provident Fund, is also in this. If you're saying, and if Mr. Vasudev is saying that it's possible the assets will actually amount to this much, that would mean there's no reason to worry that the money will come back. Is that true?
Yes, but the point is that as far as the regulators are concerned, particularly RBI, and as far as rating agencies are concerned, they should have blown the whistle much before. I'm not saying that you downgrade the company to default, but at least do a few downgrades. Keep it under rating watch so that the investors, fund managers are alerted that there is something wrong. You can't keep it at AAA and then downgrade by 11 notches in one go.
Yes.
Then it comes as a shock.
So something was being hidden.
Yes.
Something was being hidden.
Hidden in the sense that they were complicit because of huge shareholder presence.
Was it complacency or was it malice? Are you being very kind here?
Well, you had the largest shareholders, HDFC, LIC, Abu Dhabi Investment Fund, Oryx, and every time when the company faced problem, they came out and gave cash, rights issue to to repay the bonds. This time the music stopped. We don't know why. The LIC agreed that it would subscribe to the rights issue, but at the last moment, it just didn't.
Yes. Mr. Jain Gupta, Managing Director of the Stakeholders Empowerment Services, will shareholders, ordinary citizens finally wind up holding the bill? Because I just want to remind you that the Provident Fund will actually be paid off last. If at all these assets are being sold, we'll actually have the banks that will get paid off, and then the others will get paid. The actual ordinary citizens will come last. Will we wind up holding this bill at the end of it, Mr. Gupta?
Good evening. See, I would say this problem is very, very complex and it has to be broken into a small part. First, I agree partly with the previous two gentlemen, especially Mr. Vasudev, that we have to differentiate between intent and result. Now, if there was any criminal intent or any diversion of fund or any personal beneficiation at the cost of company, it is certainly very bad. Other could be that going was good, you are expending right, left, center without bothering. But one thing which Mr. Vasudev said very simply, that liability, asset liability mismatch. Now, asset liability mismatch is not the only issue in IL&FS. It is there in many companies. All infrastructure companies in the country are having a issue of asset liability mismatch, because you borrow for 5 years and you invest in 20 or 30 years repayment period infrastructure asset, and you keep on borrowing every 5 year or 2 year or 3 year. As long as you are able to rotate, it is going is good. The moment rotation stops, the problem comes, and IL&FS is victim of that. The second is very clear the case, as pointed that when the company is not doing good, what is the responsibility of the investors in the company or directors in the company to see what is happening wrong, rather than putting cash every time. I think nobody ever took a pause and said, let us pause and see what is going wrong. Nobody did that. Be it LIC, be it SBI, be it HDFC, never. Everybody never. The third issue is very clearly that what happens when something stops, everybody becomes panicky. Now, in this panic, when rating downgraded, there was no option with mutual fund for other investors to withdraw money, because as per the law, they cannot invest in a downgraded thing, and they have to provide for in their account write-off. So everything starts a chain reaction. The issue very clearly is that we got to look at a situation in a holistic manner. In our country, we stand on an operation table. All the 4 doctors, one is surgeon, one is anesthetist, one is medicine, they are not working in cohesion, and everybody goes into a different direction. As a result, the patient dies. All agencies have to do. First and foremost, in this entire crisis, I would put the biggest blame on RBI, who has been sitting. It was a systematically important NBFC. What RBI is looking into it, what credit rating agency were doing, what bankers were doing. I would say every agency is involved. When you talk about SEBI, it was an unlisted company. So SEBI's role was minimal in that. Of course, SEBI, there are some underlying listed companies there. But I would say that amongst all regulatory agencies, SEBI had the least role. But yes, SEBI also had a role. So my issue is that unless until you keep on working in different direction, you will never find a solution. In this particular case, what happens, even if the assets were there, but since the panic situation is created, a 10,000 crore asset will be sold for 3,000 crore in a distress. So the 7,000 crore which was not there will certainly come to the book, because this money will go to some other buyer who will buying it as a distress asset and will try to make money in the future. So in this particular case, the issue is identifying the assets which are really good and not selling them at a discount. Otherwise, what will happen? Banks will have to write off money.
Sanjay Hegde, from the point of view of the law, is this a matter of competence and ethics, or is this matter of malice and crime?
Right now, the investigation is on to see what crimes, if any, can be proven and whether to file a charge sheet or not. There was one transaction in which one particular investor was duped, that is with the economic offences wing. No doubt, as investigators proceed further and more forensic audits are taken, you may or may not see a money trail round tripping through several companies, and whether some parts of the money actually reached any of the people in management. But whatever be the stealing from the company, overall there are structural issues, as the other panelists have pointed out. Structurally, what was being done was that you were using short-term money to finance long-term projects, and long-term projects which would possibly yield revenue directly or indirectly. Now, just to give you an example, one of the earliest projects that the IL&FS took forward was the Noida toll bridge. Now, the Noida toll bridge was used to collect tolls, and that was generally a revenue earner. then the matter, then the right to collect toll was struck down by the Allahabad High Court. Thereafter, the matter has been pending in the Supreme Court, and revenue there has dried up. When revenue dries up, and there are no repayments coming back in the same fashion, then obviously when your short-term interest mounts up, you are going to end up with a huge pile of debt. And as some of the other panelists pointed out, the underlying assets do not then look that attractive. They have to be resold. And whoever is going to buy them is not going to give you full market value for that. If I were to digress from IL&FS a little, this same pattern has been repeated. For instance, in the JP fiasco, the JP group of industries spent a lot of money building that expressway. The returns on the expressway were to come out from the development of the adjoining land. Now, on the adjoining land, you have huge apartment complexes built up, but there were buyers at one point of time who were also hoping to make a profit, but now there aren't enough people who are willing to go and live on it. The underlying asset has got eroded. The assumptions have gone for a 6. We are now in a situation where you have one of India's biggest shadow banks going down and probably threatening the integrity of much bigger financial institutions. You spoke only of the Employment Provident Fund. What about the LIC? That is 26% shareholder out here. Where does LIC money come from? It comes from the insurance premiums that you and I have paid to the insurance company, the state insurance company. So we are all going to end up paying the bill for this. And in the meanwhile, there have been some people like the auditors who were either sleeping on the job or were complicit, who were only concerned with their fees and who did not do their job properly. You also have management which probably lined some little nest eggs here and there. You can, of course, bring them to criminal court. You may send some of them away for a few years after many years of trial, etc. But the underlying process as far as IL&F is concerned will have to be governmental intervention if you have a government smart enough to do it. You must remember that the UPA rescued Satyam. Barack Obama rescued Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, saying they were too big to fail.
Yes.
That they were too big to fail. The question is whether the Indian government considers IL&FS too big to fail.
But let me just, for the benefit of our audience who don't know what IL&FS is, IL&FS, the full form is the Infrastructure Leasing and Financial Services Limited. It is a company that finances big infrastructure projects like large bridges or highways and other such infrastructure projects. So what it fundamentally does is that it borrows money from banks via bonds. It also borrows money from citizens and investors, mutual funds, the Provident Fund, things like that. It puts that money together and uses the money to finance large infrastructure projects. That's fundamentally what this company does. And it has found itself in a position where it is unable to pay back one loan and then another and then another, and that's how we've gotten to this point. Bhaskar Ghosh of the BJP, does the government feel that this company is too big to fail? How is it that the RBI did not notice, that the Securities Exchanges Regulator, which is the SEBI, did not notice, that the auditors did not notice? Is our financial system fundamentally broken if something like this is going on and nobody noticed? Mr. Ghosh.
I want to answer this question in two different phases. Number one, let us understand the structure of this company. This is the first private partnership company, PPP, having exposure of around $1.8 trillion. And these companies are managed by the shareholders like LIC, SBI, and Oryx Crops. But they have got a very, very, I can say, beehive model of around 169 different subsidiary companies. which is exactly very tough for any regulator or any monitoring agency to monitor. But still, their market caps and based on their performance, their rating was pretty good. Now, the first time our government, the IT department 2018, has spotted an irregularity of, these fake contracts. There is two part of the thing. One is because of its own structure and the borrowing and the lending and the borrowing pattern, the whole edifice is going to crash like Lehman Brothers. And second is the corruption into the systems, which is further eroding or further making the whole problem more critical. This, 300 crore have been siphoned off by giving the fake contract and all. The first Delhi Police Crime Branch (EOW) has filed an FIR. Based on that, ED has slammed inquiry, and they have also arrested. So this is our government 2018. The IT department has given indication there's a huge 251 crore of contract have been managed by only 22 lakhs of the overheads. So this company was formed 30 years back. It is operating in this India is for last 30 years. But this irregularity, what we found in 2018, later on it was grabbed. So first question, the government is taking all possible measures, all possible steps rather, in order to curb or order to unearth what is the criminal part of the entire things. Now coming to the structural portion, your question was the entire 91,000 crore is divided into 50,000 crore, which is for the bank borrowings, and rest is the market borrowing through different bonds and everything. And what our finance minister has told that as the entire instrument is superannuated, so that has to face the market realization or depending on the market response. Now the challenge in front of the in the government is to ask the RBI to write off the 30,000 crores. And so this 30,000 crores was not built in last 5 years, it was built in last 30 years. And the contract which they have failed is basically because of they don't have cash, and they have a cost overrun of different projects, and lot of their projects have been stuck because of the land issues. So there is another very important
But let me ask you a very simple question, Mr. Bhaskar Ghosh. If you keep telling us from the government of India that infrastructure is being built, that rural electrification and rural roads are being built, that we've actually gone hammer and tongs at infrastructure and done a fantastic job, then why is it that according to what you just said, that India's biggest infrastructure funding company right now finds itself in a position where all of its projects, according to you, are stuck?
I'm answering that only. Though Government of India has given so much of contract of tunnels and roads, but because of their poor management, because of their corrupted management, they are not been able to conclude or complete the projects. That is why the cost overrun. And lot of places they were also strangled into land issues. So overall, the running and the management of the company, like one ex-chairman was arrested. That is, though Government of India has given a constant support, that is why even the PF fund was invested. LIC, SBI was one of the major investors, along with the Japanese company.
This money that you say, the 50,000 crore or the 40,000 crore, one second, Mr. Ghosh, that will need to be written off, that the RBI is going to ask the banks to write off at this point. Where will that money come from, Mr. Ghosh? When the government decides to recapitalize 12 PSU banks, and let me point out that, where will the money come from? Whose money is that?
That's what I'm telling you. Now, this is the new solvency test which has been formulated by the new board and the MCA. According to that, when they put into new insolvency test, so they have been caught. Now the Government of India is now discussing at their own level that what is the effect of this 30,000 crore write-off. Right? There is so many measures could be there in order to reduce the impact. But my question is that the Government of India, our government, present government, has taken all initiatives to identify, otherwise it could be a much bigger scam or much bigger exposure of Indian in the money market as well as the economy.
Let me bring this back. One second. Mr. Bhaskar Ghosh, you're talking about writing off 30,000 crore rupees, which basically means you forget about it, it's not going to come back. Who pays for that money? The 48,239 crore rupees that the finance ministry is going to pump into the public sector banks, whose money is that? Where does that money come from? Is it not the money of the citizens of India? Doesn't the government of India have a responsibility towards the citizens of India to make sure that companies like LIC and SBI that are actually publicly owned, which means that that is our money, is better run, that there's better management, that there's better accountability, instead of constantly writing off and constantly turning these loans around and restructuring these loans and putting more money in the PSUs, but making no difference whatsoever in how it is run and how it is managed?
It's a long road now. It's a very long road because
but have they
the assets
started?
have to be sold. The money will have to be slowly returned. There will be haircuts, huge haircuts taken by. Yeah, please.
Yes, Mr. Ghosh, go ahead.
Yeah. So let me answer these questions. Faye, let me answer these questions. First of all, the public money.
Yes. What about the public money?
Yeah. Now, the public money which has been pumped in for this into this company, that has to be recovered. That is the priority of Government of India, and I can tell you that in a $1.8 trillion turnover or market caps, at least because of our very fast and very timely initiative, we have restricted to 90,000 crores, number one. Number two is that there are, lot of measures are there, like NCLT is there doing the monetization process for the assets and all. So lot of measures have been taken so that by selling the assets or by the market operation of those bonds or the market realization of the bonds, maximum money is trying to be recovered. But the question is two things, that why it has happened. It is running for 30 years where our government was not there in 30 years. But during the course of our government, we have pinned down this crisis, we have identified the corruptions, and then we are trying to take as much as measures as possible so that the common citizens' money
Mr. Ghosh.
or the poor money should not go to drain.
Okay, we have someone on the phone line right now who doesn't want to give us her name, but she was apparently a former employee of the company. Go ahead, we can hear you. Good evening, go ahead, we can hear you. If you can hear me, go ahead.
Yeah, hi ma'am.
Yes. What would you like to say?
Actually, I was working with the company for some time and we were stalled by saying that government has not paid our money. And still, they are my colleagues who are not getting their salaries.
For how many months were you not paid your salaries? Would you switch off the television in the background, please, and tell me for how many months were you not paid your salaries?
Like, we used to get after like 2 months, 3 months like that.
Sir, you didn't get your salary for 3 months. And were you told by anybody in the company as to what was wrong? Okay, we seem to have a bad line and we'll try and get that back. And Govt, I do want to ask you this. There is, like we said, mutual fund money. There is pension money. There is money of other investors. If we go piece by piece, and I think the most crucial bit here is the pensions. Now, the good thing about the pensions, the EPFO, is that it has a sovereign guarantee. So the government will pay the pensions of whoever's money is lost. So what happens to that money? Does it get recovered? Do the citizens in any way get affected at all?
As I was saying, it's a long road.
Yes.
You have to sell the projects piece by piece. There could be gold plating. For instance, the project
What is gold plating?
Inflating the project cost.
Okay.
If some of these allegations of bogus contract are true, and then you'll be receiving, say, 1/3 or half of that money. So people will have to take haircuts. They will not get back whatever they have invested. And the parallel, the ED investigation will go on. Now, these kind of charges which have been made, bogus bills and other things, they tend to take a serious turn because we have very harsh laws now.
Yes.
We have Prevention of Money Laundering Act, we have Benami laws, and people can be dragged for questioning, detained, and all these things will happen. And the things can be even more complicated if ED goes and attaches those property. In that case, the banks and ED will be fighting among themselves who will get the property and how to recover it.
Yes.
So all that thing, I mean, for the investors, there's the worst losers.
Yeah, so actually, if we take this piece by piece, what will happen now is the ED will seize all the properties. The Enforcement Directorate will actually put everything under investigation and actually start that. When the banks actually have access to liquidate, you're saying that you'll only recover about a third of what was invested.
One doesn't know.
One doesn't know.
That's what Mr. Vasudevan was saying, that one really doesn't know the value of the assets, how much it would fetch.
Out of the money that is recovered, the banks get paid first.
They're the secured lenders.
They're the secured lenders, they get paid first. After which, who comes next? What about the PFs? What about the mutual funds? Will the mutual funds recover any of their money at all?
Well, they have if they have invested in NCDs, which are secured instruments, in that case, they also come after the banks, along with the banks.
So, if I'm someone who's worried about my Provident Fund, do I have to be worried at all in this case?
Provident Fund, no. But investors, mutual fund investors have already taken the hit.
Have already, the values of those mutual funds have already fallen. So, it's important for you to realize that even though there was Provident Fund money in this company, you as a salaried person will not have to take the hit because your Provident Fund is guaranteed by the government and you will still get paid your pension when it is due. This is basically the people who managed it who will now have to find a way to recover that money, but it doesn't come on to you. As far as mutual funds are concerned, specifically debt mutual funds that had invested in these bonds, they're the ones who have already lost value and that hit has already been taken. Mr. Vasudev, here's my question to you. As far as the public money or the funds that are being used to run LIC, to run SBI, and via these companies, run companies like IL&FS, to refund or to recapitalize our PSU banks, is there enough of a push from our government to be more responsible about management?
Well, you know, when you got the basic problem of public ownership of these banks, these public sector banks, so if they are in difficulty, whether they are not able to meet the capital adequacy norms and therefore they are not able to expand their business, or whether they have written off a lot of loans and or made provisions for a lot of loans, and therefore the capital has been used for that purpose, and therefore if the government is the owner of these banks, it is the owner's responsibility to capitalize the bank. So government here is only sort of in a way discharging the ownership responsibilities. If it were a private bank and it had a similar situation, then the shareholders of the private banks would have to chip in more money so that enough capital is available in the bank.
But Mr. Vasudev, if the government is the owner of these banks, along with, you're absolutely right, putting in more money, along with putting in more money, isn't it also the government's responsibility to make sure these banks are run properly?
Correct. That is the problem. So the starting point is the public sector banks, the way they are run, the way they are structured, the way the appointments are made, they are all political appointments of the directors, of the chairman and everybody else, their board of directors, and therefore their accountability to the other shareholders and to the accountability to the investors and all is not there. They are only interested in ensuring their accountability to the government. So the starting point is the public ownership of these banks. So I think if you are really looking for fundamental solutions, we have to go the way of sort of reducing government ownership in these banks and make them run as companies. You know, these public sector banks are creatures of an act of parliament, unlike other banks which are creatures of the company law. If you are a creature of the company law, then all those laws apply to you, your accountability to the shareholders, SEBI regulations, various other things follow. But here you are a creature of an act of parliament. So the first thing is to make these public sector banks as companies under the Companies Act. Remove that shield of public ownership. Let them do the business as other private banks are doing. So that is the starting point. And as long as you are not able to do that, and these banks run into problems, they are short of capital. Who else is going to put in money? Only the shareholder can put in money, or you start closing down the banks, which the economy cannot afford. So that is one part of the problem. The other, I think you were talking about IL&FS investment. I think the world over the practice is that the pension funds and the provident funds, they are entities which have access to long duration money, because people invest in pension plans and provident funds, and they take it only at the time of retirement. So these type of entities the world over are the ideal entities for investing in long gestation infrastructure projects. So there is nothing wrong if insurance companies or pension funds and all invest in this. But the problem is the governance of the institution was not good enough. It had so many shortcomings that they were not able to use that money properly. They invested in long-term projects, borrowed short-term from banks and mutual funds, and it is largely a large proportion, I feel, is a liquidity problem of IL&FS. Of course, now when you have to make distress sale, then whatever assets you have, those assets will not get the market value, so you will have to take a haircut. If they have to take the haircut, then all others who have put in their money will have to share in that haircut. But certainly if the company goes into liquidation, then the statutory dues will rank highest. The provident fund and all are statutory dues, they will rank higher, then the secured creditors, and then the others. And of course, the last will be the shareholders who are at the bottom of the heap. But I don't feel that IL&FS will reach that situation where you will need to liquidate the company. You may have to liquidate some of these subsidiary companies and all that, but IL&FS as an entity has sufficient underlying assets. Maybe the investors, the banks and all will have to take some haircut if the liquidity problems are to be resolved by selling off those assets at less than market price. But otherwise, the underlying assets, the investments made are very much there.
Mr. Jain Gupta had a point to make. Mr. Gupta, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I would say there are many issues here. The first issue is that the gentleman who was talking about the private ownership and something, IL&FS had two private shareholders also, Oryx Corporation of Japan and HDFC. So it is not a case that if you are a PSU or if you are a private, everything is good. No, it's not the case. Here the issue was that there were too many owners, but nobody taking the lead. That equity was divided between 4 or 5%, so nobody was owner. So this company was managed more by professionals than anything. So in theory, there are two things. There are ownership problems, other is an agency problem. So IL&FS is a typical case of agency problem where the agents who were managing the company failed the investors. The second issue is this: it is a situation like a parent having 193 children. Now the parent would not know what 193 children are doing. So we have been always saying that limited number of subsidiaries should be there. How do you manage a company with 193 subsidiaries? The board of directors who meet for 4 hours for a board meeting can't be looking into 193 subsidiaries. So somewhere online this structure is wrong. The other thing is very clearly that, again repeating, one doesn't know at this stage what is the level of corruption, what is the level of gold plating, what is the level of loss. But certainly if the assets are sold at a desperate measure, there will be much more loss. So ideally going forward the issue would be that put assets in a SPV and at the fair value, fair market value, removing the gold plating part of it. That is first. Then again go into the style, because all these investors would have some directors on the board. Can we question those directors that why you could not follow some prudent norms and find out what was happening? Because, and similarly credit rating agency. Now how it is possible that till yesterday there was AAA and next day they become D, and now it keeps a panic reaction in the market because the mutual fund withdraw money, nobody wants to renew the loan. So what happened? Everything which was yesterday healthy becomes a dead body today. So my issue is this, and secondly I would say the Reserve Bank of India always treats NBFC it is a very important NBFC, but let's look at the regulation. Banks are regulated very much, whereas NBFC regulation is not. And why most of the companies are becoming bigger and bigger NBFCs? Because they do not want to become bank and get controlled by RBI. So it is a very easy route for running a company which is a finance company as good as bank, and many NBFCs are much bigger than the private banks, some smaller private banks. But then because there is no regulation, so they are thriving.
Yes.
So somewhere a balance has to be brought between the regulation for the bank and something. And lastly, one I would point out that today banking sector regulation is very, very different. It's like a Jew. You have a different act to regulate State Bank. You have a different act to regulate IDBI. You have a different act to regulate other public sector bank. You have a different act to regulate private sector bank. And within the Reserve Bank of India, for private sector bank, if you are born in 2000, there is a different regulation. If you are born in 2009, there is a different regulation. I think somewhere there is a need to club everything. Banking Regulation Act is 1949 vintage. So nobody has bothered to bring them up to the date.
Yes.
Banking regulation has not been amended even to bring the changes of Companies Act.
Yes.
So, I would say that nobody has paid attention. Everybody says, okay.
So fundamentally, I mean, put very interestingly by Mr. Gupta that there are in fact too many children at the table and nobody is able to pay attention to every children. 193 subsidiaries are too complicated, and of course there are too many class monitors, so there are too many regulators and there are too many laws and it's too complicated. Fundamentally, it boils down to another massive write-off that our banking sector is going to have to do. And what does that mean really for the general health of our financial market? I want to thank our panelists for joining us on the show and helping us understand what is going on with the IL&FS problem as the Enforcement Directorate continues to now begin raids in people's homes, in the homes of the ex-management, to find out if in fact there were crimes that took place of forgery and cheating over the last 8 years to hide the truth about IL&FS. Thanks for watching.